Well, good midday. Seems to be midday. Um, I just like to start by explaining a little bit why I really wanted to prepare this sermon. It's because I have recently hired two people to work for me, and I have decided that through a long and careful process, I want to lead them to Christ. And it is sometimes, and I find it's sometimes easier to lead people to Christ, to give them a reason to find Jesus. Because if you don't need Jesus, why would you accept Jesus? And there are many thoughts in my sermon. It is slightly philosophical, and if it's inconsistent, just you can talk to me later. It has very many facets to it, that those thoughts that I really want to convey. And firstly, anybody having their phone in their hand, now would be a good time to turn it off and put it in your pocket. And in my sermon, I will talk about this, and there's a reason for this. So just in case you have your phone in your hand, please turn it off and put it in your pocket. It's not a fruitful thing to have your phone in your hand. And I will explain why it's not. So we'll start by reading two parts from the Bible. The one I said that I want to have a sermon about the meaning of life, and Katja Maitola said, "Are you going to read from Ecclesiastes?" And I said, "Why would I do that?" So here it is, Ecclesiastes 2:10 and 11. I denied myself nothing my eyes desired. I refused my heart no pleasure. My heart took delight in all my labor. And I'd like you to, let's read this particular line again. My heart took delight in all my labor. And then it continues, and this was the reward of all my toil. Yet when I surveyed all my hands had done, and what I had toiled to achieve, everything was meaningless, a chasing after the wind. Nothing was gained under the sun. And the second part, I want to read from Job 7, 1-4, and 16. Do not mortals have hard service on earth? Are not their days like those of hired laborers, like a slave longing for the evening shadows, or a hired laborer waiting to be paid? So I have been allotted months of futility, and nights of misery have been assigned to me. When I lie down, I think, how long before I get up? The night drags on, and I toss and turn until dawn. I despise my life. I would not live forever. Let me alone. My days have no meaning. I asked my worker one morning, I said, do you have meaning in your life? And she told me, she's very young, she may be 18 or 19, she told me she has no meaning. She doesn't know. And I said that we better find you some meaning, because if you have no meaning, what is your life really worth? It is not a new phenomenon that people are seeking meaning in their life. Possibly one of the oldest books of the Bible, in Job, he complains his life not having meaning in his misery. And Ecclesiastes, Solomon is complaining that in all his abundance he found no meaning. Yet he did try to find meaning in so many places and things while keeping his self-study on himself. Both in abundance and in absolute depravity, we have people saying, there is no meaning in their lives. There's a website that I stumbled upon when I looked for what does the world have to say about meaning. And in this website, Generation Nomads, he has a blog where the title is Finding Your Purpose in Life, a Guide for Millennials. I thought, well, here's a guide for someone to find meaning. The post starts by saying that you will not find a purpose for your life, but instead you should try to find why you need a purpose for your life, or a profession for that matter. The writer ends up quoting the Beatles, saying, "When I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wrote down happy. They told me I didn't understand the assignment. I told them they don't understand life." It sounds very deep. It sounds profound. So is happiness really the meaning of life, our ultimate goal? When the researchers took a mouse and gave it a button to press every time it produced drug that gave the mouse pleasure. Next to it was food and water. The mouse ended up pressing the button and nothing but pressing the button until it died of thirst and hunger. If you could ask, in the middle of this experiment, the mouse, if it was content and happy with its life, I bet the mouse would say yes. It was euphoric. It was beyond happy. But it died very shortly after. His life was wasting away rapidly. We can see that happiness may not be equal to a fulfilling good life, but actually may be very destructive and wasteful. The feeling of contentment is important, but the means to get there need to be correct for life to make any sense. Let's look again at the blog post, Finding Your Purpose in Life for Millennials. We don't have to read it, but we can go down on that blog post and there is a subtitle, and the subtitle says, "Here's the Secret of the Rich and Wealthy." This subtitle is consistent with a questionnaire that was done for the millennials, anybody who was born after the 2000. What do they want from life? The most common answer was being rich. This was over the half of the people polled born in this century. Of those who answered rich or money, over half listed the second most important thing to chase after in life was fame. So really what they wanted to be was rich and famous. So in line of those answers to the millennial generation, they will pursue in their life both money and fame. Their life purpose being gathering money and popularity. The money and popularity do not give us happiness. Billy Bob Harrell won $31 million in 1997. Harrell bought ranch and homes and cars for several family members, gave money to church from his lottery winnings. He and his wife separated in just 20 months after winning the lottery, and he killed himself. To his financial advisor, Harrell said, "Winning the lottery was the worst thing that ever happened to me." Callie Rogers, at only age 16 in England, won the lottery. And after winning the lottery, she went on vacations, took plastic surgeries, and bought cars. And within short time, attempted suicide twice. She has since started her life over with a new man, has children, and is training as a nurse, and she says that she is happier now without the millions. Like Solomon, they agreed. Vanity. This is not to say that there isn't any happy lottery winners, but that money itself does not equate the happiness and contentment. For in Matthew 6:21 it says, "Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." We live for things that we want. And what we want is what we see. For things that you do not know, you cannot want. We mostly hunger after things that we do not have. But when we get them, we're mostly disappointed. Or at least partially. And look at the view of marriage. We think that it's absolutely amazing to have the other person fully, to live in love and bliss and happiness. In reality, like our good friend said, marriage is very everyday. Before we achieve it, we think it will give us much satisfaction. Once we achieve it, our goal, it does not fulfill our dreams. Money, we may think, if only we had so much, it would give us happiness. But actually, to get what we want, you will need ever more of it. I often say that what you have, you cannot want because you already have it. We should be careful of what we wish for, because God may give us what we ask for. In our lives, we do live for some goals. Whether we know it or not, you get up in the morning, perhaps even with the assistance of an alarm clock. There is something that you are getting up for. This something may not be so clearly defined in your mind. In fact, most of the time, we are not consciously thinking when we are awake. In fact, it has been found that our brains are on autopilot 95% of the waking time. It allows our brains to not consume so much energy and help us to survive the daily life. The journey to destination takes a long time and a return journey only a short time. This is because on the way, you have actively to think where you're going, to observe to get to your destination. But on your way back, you know the way, and it's no longer needed to think so much. When you use a foreign language, at first you get very tired after a full day. And this is, though you get tired of day of using the foreign language because it requires continuous thinking. After a while, the information can take over, the automation can take over, and you don't get so tired of the new language. We live our complicated lives over and over, doing repetitive tasks like getting up and washing ourselves and going to work, to a study place. 95% of the time, we exert no conscious effort to do so. Not only do we do physical things like going to work, but also emotional things like, thank God it's Friday. And somehow that makes us feel good about Friday. Or, oh my God, it's Monday morning, I hate this. And we feel bad. Automatically, without thinking, somehow we can control our feelings. Some of those automated things, we should take a conscious note of not letting our environment dictate our feeling. Have you had one of those really bad days? When you get up, the alarm didn't really work, you didn't have time to take a shower or even brush your teeth, you went out and you had only one shoe on, it was raining, the car tire was broken, you had to run to work, and then you found out the work was closed. Absolutely everything went horribly wrong. And you feel like you had a bad day. Because everything around you told you that you had a bad day. You come home, and your best friend calls and says that they have booked a spa treatment for you and him or her, and all of a sudden you feel better. It proves that your environment can make a bad day, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a bad day for if you decide against this. And we are very often ushered into thinking like this. On a Sunday we come to church, it's a good day. On a Monday morning we wake up, it's a bad day. When it doesn't necessarily have to be so. This is important because we have challenges in our everyday. And without thinking, you might have a bad day because of those challenges. This, in simple words, mean that we will repeat our actions over and over because we are hardwired to do so. We end up repeating things in life and seeking unconsciously to do things that give us pleasure and satisfaction. We do this in very subtle ways, and if we don't pay attention, as I know we don't, we end up doing things we never intended to do. Pleasure can be reduced to neurotransmitters. Like a mouse earlier, we can be stimulated either artificially by drugs or naturally by life to enjoy little chemical interactions in our brain. Why am I talking about brains? Because the feeling of purpose and a reason for our lives that we think is in our brains. If you take the brain away, there's no thought, there's no purpose. So let's look at a few of the transmitters. And as I read through this list, you do not have to remember the name of the transmitter. The important thing is how you can stimulate this. This is not an exhaustive list, but it's a short list. There's a neurotransmitter called dopamine. And what it says, this is from a website on Parkinson's disease, where your neurotransmitters get a little less and it has an effect on your mood. So dopamine, this hormone drives the brain's reward chemical. It is released when you are doing something pleasurable. This could be eating a great meal, listening to inspiring music, getting a massage, or completing a physical exercise workout. The release of dopamine gives feelings of well-being and motivates you to seek things you enjoy and do well. This is why you try to avoid challenges that you know you will fail in. Serotonin, it stabilizes our mood, feeling of well-being and happiness. Additionally, it helps decrease our worries and concerns and is associated with learning and memory. Serotonin is naturally triggered by regular things we can do each day. Going for a walk in the sunshine, getting a good night's sleep, spending time in nature or self-care activities to reduce stress levels. The serotonin reuptake inhibitors are a group of medications that are used for depression. So that is to say that they extend the effect of serotonin on your central nervous system. There are endorphins. The endorphins are produced by the central nervous system to help us deal with physical pain. They are released in response to pain or stress, but they are also released during other activities like eating, exercise, or sex. They release a brief euphoria that covers the pain. Athletes frequently speak of endorphin high when they get to push their body to the point of real discomfort or pain. And oxytocin. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone. Extensive research has linked oxytocin release to a life satisfaction levels. It appears to play a larger role in women's physiology and happiness than men. The oxytocin is mainly correlated with loving touch and close relationships. This hormone produces a multiple hit by stimulating the serotonin and dopamine systems with lowering your anxiety. When we do repetitive activity that releases some of the aforementioned hormones, our brains are given a signal of reward. If the reward is strong enough, we will continue to do that activity over and over. And our brains learn in a way that when you complete one task, it is like cutting a path through a thick woods. It's hard to learn a new thing. But when you do that over and over, it becomes easier and easier. Eventually so that you can do it without thinking. We should be careful about things that give us pleasure, that we don't end up living in a world where our lives are wasting away. Have you noticed an activity that people engage in multiple times a day, but like a drug? I have a confession to make. I use my phone way too much. It has been studied that the phone, by giving a signal, it gives us a shot of dopamine, one of those pleasure hormones. Not only that, but the apps and games that we have in our phones are designed so that they get us hooked by maximizing the feel-good reaction of our bodies. And if you still have your phone with you, here's a questionnaire for you. It is originally called the Dependency on Nicotine Evaluation Form by Fagerström. I think it's very revealing. If you answer yourself these questions, there's 5 questions here. How soon after waking do you use your phone? In 5 minutes, the first 30 minutes, or within an hour? Most of you use your phone as an alarm clock. The answer is within a minute. Not only do you turn off your alarm, but you take off your phone, you look for the weather, you look at Facebook, and 20 minutes has passed. You score 3 points. Do you find it difficult not to use your phone where you really should not, like church or some other place? Maybe in a car or in a store where you're waiting for your turn. Maybe your answer is yes. 1 point. If you had to give up using your phone, the most difficult time would be after waking or other time. Now, if you don't have an alarm clock, you score 1 point. Number 4, do you use your phone every morning? Yes or no? Well, again, if you use your phone as an alarm clock, 1 point. And lastly, do you use your phone even when you are sick? Yes. Now, if you answered like I suggested that maybe I would answer, the dependency is high. For cigarette users, this evaluation form is used to try to gauge how badly they are addicted. And by using this, I'm sure it doesn't work exactly for a phone, but I think it's a very good indicator how addicted we are to this activity that gives us pleasure by our doing it over and over. And if you evaluate whether this pleasure-producing activity is like this button for a mouse, or is it the physical exercise, I believe we all think that it's a little bit more like the button for a mouse. I see people on their phone almost all the time. At work, in traffic, in bed, driving a car. What does the Bible say that we should do all the time? In Joshua 1:8 it says, "Keep this book of the law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. For what we do and what we see and what we are thinking will bring and become the purpose in our life." Because what you set out to do will be the place where you receive your satisfaction hormones. And it will always also become the reason for getting up in the morning. The more difficult the task, the greater the reward hormone. But if you cannot complete the task, you will be frustrated by it. My wife says often, when she is tired of being home with the kids, "This is meaningless. Is there any meaning to my life? All I do gets undone." How would you feel if someone undid what you did all day? That is, she is not completing the task or a challenge successfully that she has set for herself. There is a secret to this. You should be careful how you set yourselves the challenges. Make them easy enough that you can complete them, but hard enough that they will give you the satisfaction. Maybe break down a challenge to smaller increments that you can complete some of them and only be frustrated by a very few parts of it. It will help you feel satisfaction in life. I have been feeling like the time that we have moves on so quickly. That week is comprised mostly of Monday morning and a Friday afternoon, as it is a one long day. Sometimes it seems that months are equally short. This phenomenon, I have found, comes from a way that we perceive the passage of time. It is something we experience consciously, but if we are not conscious of it, the time goes by all the same. And our brains like to be on autopilot whenever possible. But only when we are awake from this autopilot, we notice the time that has passed. So if you feel like your week has gone in a flash, it seems like on Monday morning you woke up and by the time you got off work or school or some other activity, it's already Friday. Your brain has taken over on an autopilot. You have not been consciously thinking. And if you have plowed these paths in your life that direct your activity to an area where it does not bring fruit, you should reevaluate the things that you do daily. Here in church, you find yourself sitting at the same spot week after week. Why? Because you showed up with your brains on an autopilot. That is not a bad autopilot that leads you to the Word of God. For in Psalm 1, it says, "Blessed, but is a happy, is the one who does not walk in the step with the wicked, or stand in the way of the sinners, take or sit in the company of mockers, but whose delight is in the law of the Lord, who meditates on it day and night. The person is like a tree planted by the streams of water, which yields its fruit in season, and whose leaf does not wither. Whatever they do prospers." I do not think the Bible says that you will achieve riches in this world if you believe. But it says right here, the one that thinks on the Word of God will complete their task and will receive satisfaction from it, no matter what life brings you. But you should not only come to church by habit, but find a reason that motivates you to come here. There's a story of a family that when they cooked the ham, they always cut the end off before putting it in the oven. Then one day the father asked the mother, why does she cut the ham's end off before she put it in the oven? And she replied, because my mother always did. So I decided to do so. So they went and asked the mother, why did she cut the end of the ham away? And she replied, because my mother did also. So they proceeded to call the great-grandmother to find out why she cut the ham off. And she said, "It did not fit in my casserole dish, so I cut the head off." This is an illustration of doing an activity only through tradition, contrast of doing so because of a reason. For if you do not have a reason to come to church, how can you give your children or friends a reason for coming with you? There is a tendency for the generation to have first a conviction. If they don't transfer the reason of faith, they will only pass on a tradition, and which will in turn turn into an opinion when it's passed along. What I want you to take away from this is to remember that the Word of God will give you encouragement, and you should not let your environment dictate how you feel. You should live a consciously and meaningfully life, knowing like Solomon that the work will give your heart delight, and working towards understanding God through the study of His Word, you will find contentment. Your life will be fruitful in every season of your life.